All right, method number 3 for solving a quadratic is solving by completing the square. What does completing the square mean? It means that we get to use a special situation with factoring called a perfect square trinomial, and we will combine factoring and taking the square root into one process to make it the most easiest streamlined process as possible. Now, when I come back, I will give you a graphic organizer, and so if you're watching this after I have come back, then you can follow along based off of the graphic organizers that I've given you, okay? So, we have certain type of quadratics. Y equals x squared plus 6x minus 10. And I know I cannot factor that. No factors of 10 will give me a 6x. How do I know that? Because the factors of 10 are 1 and 10 and 2 and 5. Will that ever give me a 6x? No. So in order to factor by completing the square, I'm going to set this equal to 0 like we typically do. X squared plus 6x minus 10 is equal to 0. So far, so good. Now, this is where we get into the tricky bits, because what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and isolate this right quick. So I'm going to add 10 to move that constant over, and I'm going to get the expression x squared plus 6x, and I'm going to put a little blank here, is equal to 10, and I'm going to do another blank. Ms. Smith, why did you just do a blank? This is where completing the square comes into play, okay? I'm going to take half of my b term, and then I'm going to take that, and I'm going to square whatever solution I get, and this will become my new constant. And you'll see why we do this in just a second. We know that b is 6. So I'm going to take half of 6, which is what? 6 divided by 2 is 3, and I'm going to square 3. 3 squared is 9. Okay? So now I have this trinomial that I can factor. What can I factor it to? Well, this is why taking the solving by completing the square is so special. I know that the square root of 9 is 3. I know that my sign right here is a positive sign. So I'm going to go ahead and just create the two factors, x plus 3 squared is equal to 19. How did you get that, Ms. Smith? Again, I took x squared plus 6x plus 9, and I factored it. Although I know that if I take the square root of 9 and take this sign, I can create the double parentheses x plus 3 squared. Now, if you need more convincing, let's go ahead and factor this. This is 9, this is 6. What are the factors of 9 that will give you 6? 3 and 3. So I'm going to do this box real quick. X squared, 3x, 3x, and 9. X goes here, 3 and 3. I have two parentheses, x plus 3 times x plus 3. And I've been telling you that when you have that, I'm not going to mark it wrong, but technically speaking, the correct way to write this is x plus 3 squared. That is why it is so important that completing the square will give you this, because we get a perfect square. What does that mean? That means my length and my width are the exact same size. Goes back to a perfect square. A perfect square has the same exact length, 4, 4, 4, and 4 on each side. What's the area of that? That's going to be 4 squared. It's the same thing, okay? I'm going to come back to this one. And so now we're left with x plus 3 squared equals 19. That should now all of a sudden set up remembrance bells. Okay, I can solve this by taking the square root of both sides. Okay, so I'm going to take the square root of both sides. X plus 3 squared and 19. This crosses out, and this becomes I'm going to come over here. I'm going to erase this. X plus 3 equals plus or minus the square root of 19. Now, just in case you don't know, 19 is prime, so the only factors of 19 is 1 times 19. If you don't believe me, try those numbers, see if anything else comes up. You'll be a millionaire if you come up with any other factors. Whole numbers, okay? Whole numbers. So, have we solved for x? No. We're going to subtract 3 from both sides. X is equal to negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 19. That is my factors. That's how we solve by completing the square. Let's do one more example. If I have, let's make it a little bit more complicated. Y equals 2x squared plus 20x minus, let's say, let's do 100. Okay? Let's look at this. We need to, as we always keep saying, factor out the greatest common factor. So that's the first step. Take a 2 out. This becomes x squared plus 10x minus 50. Now, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of this y. I don't know why I didn't do that in the first place. And hopefully you need to set it equal to 0. Because you're correct. We need to set it equal to 0 so we can go ahead and factor out our quadratic. Okay? So, we're going to go ahead and follow the steps for completing the square like we have already. And I'm going to go ahead and just go to the next page and set this up. We have 2. We go back, x squared plus 10x minus 50. 2 times x squared plus 10x minus 50 equals 0. Okay? Now, this 2 is going to be divided into both sides. What happens? What is 0 divided by any number? Hopefully you said 0 because that is the truth. So now we have the correct setup. Add 50 to both sides. X squared plus 10x. I'm going to go ahead and add in my blank. 50 plus my blank over here. Now, I'm going to solve by taking the square. Okay, sorry. I'm going to take half of b. So 10 divided by 2 is 5. And then I'm going to square it. That equals 25. So I'm going to add 25 to both sides. And I'm going to get... I can go ahead and factor this perfect square trinomial. Okay? What's the square root of 25? 5. So x plus 5 squared is equal to 75. Take the square root of both sides. X plus 5 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 75. Now, I know 75 is not a perfect square. Okay? So I'm going to simplify this to 25 times 3. And then 25 is 5 times 5. So I have x plus 5 is equal to plus or minus 5 square roots 3. Subtract 5 from both sides. X is equal to negative 5 plus or minus 5 square roots 3. That is my solution to that quadratic. Okay? Those perfect square trinomials, these completing the squares, all of this has a process. So what is the process again? Your first step, move. No, what is my first step always? Check for GCF. Move constant to the other side. Third step, take half of my b, square it, and add to both sides. Factor, and then solve by take the square root, by taking square root. It's a process, but you can do it.